Have you ever paused in the hush before sleep and wondered where it is we truly go when dreams arrive, slipping beyond the edges of waking thought into realms that feel both familiar and impossibly distant? If you're settling in right now, wherever you may be listening from, whether under the same stars that once watched over ancient valleys or in a quiet room far from any hillside, take a gentle moment to share in the comments below the place that holds you and the hour that finds you there. It is here, in these soft transitions, that the brain reveals its most surprising vitality. Far from dimming into silence, the mind during dreaming often pulses with activity that rivals or even exceeds the patterns seen in full daylight hours, lighting up regions tied to emotion, memory, and imagination, while the body rests in profound stillness. Researchers tracing these rhythms have noted how blood flow increases to the visual and emotional centers, creating landscapes that unfold without the usual constraints of logic or time. This lively inner world first came into clearer view through the discovery of REM sleep in the early 1950s, when careful observations of sleeping volunteers uncovered rapid, darting movements of the eyes beneath closed lids, accompanied by irregular breathing and a near-total quieting of the muscles that normally keep us upright and moving. What emerged was not a single state, but a recurring cycle, one that returns several times across the night and grows longer toward morning, carrying the dreamer through phases where the brain generates its own private theatre from fragments of the day and deeper currents of feeling. Consider then the first gentle fact. The brain's electrical patterns during these REM intervals shift into a theta rhythm that echoes the same waves seen in calm wakefulness, suggesting an internal rehearsal rather than simple shutdown. A second observation follows closely, that muscle paralysis, known as atonia, protects the sleeper from acting out the vivid scenes unfolding within, yet leaves the eyes free to trace unseen horizons. Third, studies have shown that even brief awakenings from REM often capture dream reports rich in narrative, while awakenings from other stages yield far less story-like content. Fourth, the discovery revealed that newborns spend nearly half their sleep in this active state, hinting at its possible role in building early neural connections before the world fully arrives. Fifth, temperature regulation loosens during REM, allowing the body to drift closer to the surrounding air in a way that deepens the sense of release. Sixth, heart rate can fluctuate as though responding to imagined events, rising and falling with the emotional tone of the dream itself. Seventh, the pons region at the base of the brainstem appears to initiate these cycles by sending signals upward, orchestrating the shift from quiet rest into vivid inner motion. Eighth, blood pressure may rise modestly, mirroring the intensity of scenes that feel urgent or joyful without any outward movement. Ninth, creative problem-solving sometimes surfaces more readily after REM periods, as if the dreaming mind rearranges daytime puzzles into fresh arrangements. 10th, sensory input from the outside world is largely gated, yet occasional sounds or touches can weave themselves into the ongoing dream narrative with surprising seamlessness. 11th, the length of REM episodes lengthens across the night, so that the final cycles before waking may last half an hour or more, offering extended time for the mind to wander. 12th, certain medications that suppress REM have been observed to increase the intensity of dreaming on nights when the suppression lifts. 13th, the eyes move in patterns that sometimes correspond to the direction of gaze within the dream, as though scanning an inner landscape. 14th, emotional processing appears heightened, with the amygdala showing robust activity that may help soften the charge of difficult memories by morning. 15th, the hippocampus, busy consolidating new experiences during the day, quiets in a distinctive way during REM, allowing broader associations to form across distant recollections. 16th, breathing grows irregular, sometimes quickening as if the dreamer were climbing stairs or speaking, then easing again into slower rhythms. 17th, the discovery of REM helped explain why sleep deprivation leads to rebound nights with extra REM, the brain reclaiming what it missed. 18th, even in the absence of visual input, people born blind report dreams rich in sound, touch, and spatial awareness. 19th, the prefrontal areas responsible for logical judgment remain relatively subdued, which may account for the dream's willingness to accept impossible events without protest. 20th, bursts of activity in the temporal lobes can generate the sensation of familiar faces or places drawn from memory stores. 21st, the transition into REM often follows a predictable 90-minute rhythm, though this interval can stretch or shorten with age and individual variation. 22nd, vivid colour perception in dreams seems tied to activity in visual association areas rather than the primary visual cortex. 23rd, the body's ability to regulate temperature dips, making the sleeper more responsive to the coolness of sheets or night air. 24th, researchers traced how certain neurotransmitters, particularly acetylcholine, surge during REM while others like serotonin recede, shifting the chemical climate that supports dreaming. 25th, the sudden stillness of voluntary muscles spares the sleeper from enacting even the most dramatic dream sequences. 26th, occasional twitches in fingers or facial muscles hint at the underlying motor commands that are otherwise blocked. 27th, the cycles themselves are not identical. Early REM tends towards simpler imagery, while later periods weave more elaborate stories. 28th, external cues such as a faint light or distant voice can be incorporated without fully waking the dreamer. 29th, the overall architecture of the night favours deeper non-REM sleep first, saving the more active dreaming phases for the latter half. 30th, studies of sleepwalkers show that complex behaviours arise almost exclusively outside REM, underscoring the protective role of muscle atonia. 31st, the brain's energy consumption during REM remains surprisingly close to waking levels, underscoring how much inner work continues beneath apparent rest. 32nd, the discovery that REM occurs across most mammals suggests a shared biological heritage reaching far beyond human experience. 33rd, and perhaps most gently of all, the precise reason these active periods exist continues to invite thoughtful exploration, with each night offering fresh glimpses into the quiet machinery that turns ordinary hours into something far more expansive. From these observations flows a sense of the dreaming mind as both ancient and immediate, a landscape that reappears reliably yet never quite repeats, inviting us to rest more deeply while it continues its unseen labours. If we follow the thread of these inner workings back through the hush of centuries, we might imagine standing on a windswept ridge in the cradle of Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates once whispered secrets to those who lay down at night with open hearts. There, clay tablets etched with cuneiform reveal how early scribes recorded dreams as messages from the gods, treating them not as fleeting shadows, but as threads in the fabric of fate itself. One gentle fact from these records shows priests serving as interpreters who weighed symbols like soaring birds or flowing rivers against the dreamer's waking life, offering counsel that could shift the course of a harvest or a journey. A second observation emerges from the Epic of Gilgamesh, where dream sequences guide the hero's path, suggesting that ancient minds saw sleep as a bridge to wisdom rather than mere rest. Further along the same quiet valley, Egyptian papyri from the time of the pharaohs describe dream incubation in temples dedicated to deities such as Thoth or Serapis, where supplicants would sleep on special beds after rituals of purification, awaiting visions that promised healing or guidance. A third point arises here in the way these practices value dreams as direct communications from the divine, with scribes compiling dream books that catalogued images like falling teeth or flying as portents of fortune or caution. A fourth reflection appears in the story of Thutmose IV, whose dream beside the Sphinx led to his rise as ruler, illustrating how civilizations wove prophetic sleep into the very foundation of leadership and legacy. Turning toward the sunlit hills of ancient Greece, we find temples of Asclepius, where the sick sought dream incubation through offerings and quiet contemplation, lying in abaton chambers so that the god might visit in slumber and reveal remedies. A fifth gentle insight notes how these sanctuaries blended reverence with practicality, recording hundreds of accounts where dream figures prescribed herbs or exercises that eased ailments upon waking. A sixth detail surfaces in the writings of Artemidorus, whose Ornera Critica classified dreams into categories of the everyday and the divine, encouraging listeners to consider personal context over rigid rules. A seventh thread connects to Homer's epics, where gods send dreams as warnings or encouragements, hinting at a cultural view that sleep opened doors to realms beyond mortal sight. In the broader Mediterranean world, Roman accounts echo these ideas yet add layers of caution, as emperors consulted dream interpreters before battles, while common folk sometimes feared nightmares as signs of displeasure from household spirits. An eighth observation recalls how Cicero pondered whether dreams held truth or simply reflected the day's residue, leaving room for both wonder and gentle skepticism. A ninth point extends to the Indus Valley civilizations, where Vedic texts portray dreams as echoes of past lives or glimpses of cosmic order, with rituals to honor or redirect their influence. A tenth recollection brings us to early Chinese traditions, in which the Yellow Emperor's classic on medicine linked dream imagery to imbalances in qi, suggesting sleep as a mirror for bodily harmony. Prophetic dreams thread through recorded history with quiet persistence, as when Joseph in ancient texts interpreted visions of plenty and famine that shaped entire kingdoms, or when Babylonian kings inscribed dreams of celestial omens on stelae to affirm divine favour. An 11th fact highlights how such accounts often serve to unify communities around shared symbols, turning private sleep into public meaning. A 12th insight notes Mesopotamian fears that certain dreams required exorcism-like rites to avert misfortune, balancing value with a respectful wariness. A 13th detail emerges from Egyptian lore where the god Bez appeared in protective dreams, offering mothers reassurance during vulnerable nights. Beyond these centers, indigenous traditions across the Americas viewed dreams as visits from ancestors or spirit guides, with practices of dream sharing in council circles to guide tribal decisions or heal rifts. A 14th gentle perspective recalls how some North American nations prepared for significant sleep through fasting or smudging, treating the night as sacred time for revelation. A 15th observation surfaces in African oral histories, where dreams of ancestors carried moral lessons or calls to action, preserved through storytelling that kept cultural memory alive across generations. A 16th thread touches on Norse sagas, in which dreams foretold battles or voyages, valued enough to alter plans, yet sometimes feared as harbingers of doom. A 17th point returns to Greece with Aristotle's suggestion that dreams might arise from bodily sensations during sleep, offering an early naturalistic lens alongside temple rituals. An 18th reflection considers how Persian traditions under Zoroastrian influence saw dreams as battles between light and shadow, prompting ethical reflection at dawn. A 19th insight appears in Japanese Shinto practices, where shrine visits before sleep sought kami guidance through symbolic visions of nature or lineage. A 20th recollection notes Minoan artifacts hinting at dream-related rituals on Crete, linking labyrinthine motifs to inner journeys. Throughout these cultures, the line between valuing and fearing dreams remained fluid, as when Hebrew scriptures record both comforting visions for prophets and troubling ones that demanded fasting or counsel. A 21st fact underscores how Mesopotamian or neuromancers sometimes warned against acting on unverified dreams, fostering a measured approach. A 22nd observation highlights Egyptian temple inscriptions celebrating successful incubations, while quietly acknowledging failed ones as tests of faith. A 23rd detail brings forward Celtic traditions where Druids interpreted dreams of the otherworld to mark seasonal rites, blending awe with practical wisdom. A 24th perspective emerges from Polynesian accounts of dreams guiding navigation across oceans, treated as navigational tools as vital as stars. A 25th gentle fact traces how ancient Indian epics like the Mahabharata interweave dream prophecies that influence Dharma, inviting listeners to ponder free will within fate's weave. A 26th insight notes Roman household shrines where Lares appeared in sleep to offer protection, valued yet requiring ongoing reverence to avoid neglect. A 27th point considers Siberian shamanic views of dreams as soul travels, with rituals to retrieve lost fragments and restore balance. A 28th recollection touches on Mayan codices, linking dream symbols to calendar cycles, suggesting sleep-aligned human rhythms with cosmic ones. A 29th observation reflects on how these varied understandings often converged on dreams as teachers, whether through divine visitation or inner dialogue, always inviting curiosity rather than certainty. A 30th fact recalls temple records from Epidaurus, listing healed supplicants whose dream encounters restored both body and spirit. A 31st perspective notes the quiet persistence of dream incubation into Byzantine times, where Christian saints replaced older gods in visionary encounters. A 32nd insight surfaces in Australian Aboriginal songlines, where dreams connect to ancestral beings and landscape, preserving knowledge across vast distances. A 33rd and perhaps most enduring thread reminds us that across these civilizations, dreams were held as both gift and mystery, their meanings layered like the olive groves on those Italian hillsides, inviting each generation to listen more closely while resting more deeply. From these ancient echoes flows a renewed sense of the dreaming mind as a shared inheritance, one that continues its quiet work whether we seek temples or simply close our eyes under familiar stars. Yet as those ancient echoes settle into the hush of a single night, we might imagine standing once more on a quiet hillside, this time under the faint glow of a modern observatory, where researchers watch the brain's hidden rhythms unfold. Here the same dreaming mind that once spoke through gods now reveals itself through gentler mechanisms of chemistry and memory, inviting us to consider why most visions dissolve before they can be held. A first gentle fact shows how norepinephrine levels fall sharply during REM sleep, leaving the hippocampus less able to bind fleeting dream images into lasting traces. A second observation notes that acetylcholine rises in these same moments, sharpening the inner theatre while simultaneously weakening the pathways that would carry its scenes into morning recall. A third reflection appears in studies of sleep cycles, where brief awakenings during REM allow some dream fragments to linger just long enough for later retrieval. A fourth insight surfaces in the way cortisol remains low through the night, sparing the mind from stress-related tagging that might otherwise mark dreams as important waking events. A fifth detail emerges when we consider that the prefrontal cortex, responsible for logical organization, rests in relative quiet, so dream stories form without the usual anchors of sequence or consequence. A sixth point arises from individual variation, as people who naturally wake several times each night often remember more dreams simply because those micro-arousals give the brain a chance to encode what has just unfolded. A seventh thread connects to personality traits, where those high in openness or absorption tend to retain richer nocturnal imagery because their waking attention already lingers on subtle inner signals. An eighth observation recalls how morning light itself can erase traces, since the shift from melatonin to alertness prioritizes external reality over the fragile residues of sleep. A ninth fact highlights evolutionary possibilities in which forgetting most dreams may have protected early humans from mistaking imagined threats for real ones, preserving mental clarity for survival decisions. A tenth recollection brings forward cultural techniques such as the Iroquois practice of sharing dreams at dawn, where telling the story aloud helped move fragile images into shared memory before they faded. An 11th gentle perspective notes Egyptian temple scribes who kept dream journals beside their palettes, recording symbols immediately upon waking to strengthen recall through repetition. A 12th insight surfaces in Tibetan Buddhist traditions of dream yoga, where practitioners train throughout the day to recognize sleep as another state, gradually increasing the number of dreams they can hold and reflect upon. A 13th detail appears in Senoi practices of Malaysia, where families discussed dreams each morning and sometimes acted on their suggestions, turning forgetting into an opportunity for communal wisdom. A 14th observation considers how keeping a notebook and pen within reach allows the simple act of writing to bypass the usual neurochemical barriers, anchoring images that would otherwise dissolve within minutes. A 15th point reflects on the role of intention, as those who gently remind themselves before sleep to remember their dreams often awaken with clearer fragments, because that quiet suggestion influences encoding pathways. A 16th fact underscores individual differences in dream recall, with women on average reporting more frequent memories than men, possibly linked to slight variations in REM duration and emotional processing. A 17th reflection notes that children remember dreams more vividly than adults. They're still developing memory systems less selective about which nocturnal experiences deserve storage. An 18th insight emerges from studies of trauma survivors, where heightened amygdala activity during sleep can etch certain dreams more deeply, leading to both greater recall and occasional distress. A 19th gentle fact traces how alcohol or certain medications suppress REM and therefore reduce the raw material available for morning memory, explaining why some nights leave almost no trace. A 20th recollection touches on evolutionary theories, suggesting that selective forgetting frees cognitive resources for processing real daytime events, treating dreams as temporary simulations rather than permanent records. A 21st observation highlights how lucid dreamers, through practiced awareness, can sometimes carry entire sequences across the threshold of waking by rehearsing them mentally before full alertness returns. A 22nd point considers the quiet influence of circadian timing, with dreams closest to morning often remembered best because they occur when cortisol is beginning its gentle rise and memory systems are already stirring. A 23rd detail surfaces in Japanese traditions of pillow books, small volumes kept under the sleeping mat so that images could be noted in the dark without fully breaking the spell of sleep. A 24th insight appears when we examine how anxiety about forgetting can paradoxically improve recall, as mild concern heightens attention to the first moments of awakening. A 25th fact notes that people living in societies with strong oral storytelling traditions often retain more dreams because the cultural expectation of sharing them reinforces encoding from an early age. A 26th reflection connects to modern sleep laboratories, where volunteers awakened at precise REM moments can recount long, coherent narratives that would otherwise vanish within seconds of returning to sleep. A 27th gentle perspective considers the possibility that most dreams are never meant for conscious memory at all, serving instead as overnight emotional regulation that works best when left undisturbed. A 28th observation recalls ancient Roman household customs of offering small gifts at dawn if a dream felt significant, a ritual that may have helped mark certain images for longer retention. A 29th point emerges from research showing that high dream recallers tend to have slightly thinner boundaries between sleep stages, allowing more fluid transfer of content into waking awareness. A 30th insight surfaces in Polynesian navigation lore, where dream images of stars or currents were deliberately recalled through chant upon waking, transforming potential forgetting into practical guidance. A 31st fact highlights how the very act of wondering why we forget may itself be a gentle invitation for the mind to hold just a little more of the night's quiet work. A 30-second recollection brings us back to those olive-covered hillsides, where the same stillness that once framed ancient visions now frames our own, reminding us that forgetting is not failure but part of the rhythm that lets each night feel new. A 33rd and perhaps most tender observation lingers on the simple truth that every remembered dream is a gift we have been given twice, once in sleep and again in the fragile moment of return, while the countless others continue their unseen service, softening the heart and clearing the mind so that deeper rest may follow. From this quiet understanding flows a renewed appreciation for the dreaming mind's selective memory, one that continues its gentle labour, whether we capture its images or simply let them drift away under familiar stars. Yet even as those olive-covered hillsides fade into the quiet of a deeper night, and the faint lights of the observatory dim beneath a canopy of familiar stars, we might imagine the dreaming mind turning inward once more, not merely to release what has passed, but to fulfill purposes both ancient and newly understood. Here the same rhythms that once wove visions through temple walls now reveal themselves through the delicate interplay of neural pathways and evolutionary whispers, inviting us to linger with the quiet question of why we dream at all. A first gentle fact emerges from studies of memory consolidation, where slow-wave sleep and REM phases together strengthen neural connections formed during the day, allowing the hippocampus to replay experiences in compressed sequences that gradually transfer into the neocortex for long-term storage. A second observation notes that emotional processing unfolds most vividly during REM, as the amygdala and medial prefrontal cortex interact to soften the intensity of daytime feelings, transforming raw affect into integrated understanding without the usual waking filters of judgment. A third reflection surfaces in research on synaptic homeostasis, where dreaming may serve to downscale overly strengthened synapses accumulated through learning, preserving overall brain efficiency so that each new day begins with balanced capacity rather than saturation. A fourth insight appears when we consider threat simulation theory, an evolutionary perspective suggesting that dreams rehearse ancestral dangers such as pursuit or social conflict in safe simulations, sharpening vigilance circuits without real-world risk, and thereby enhancing survival odds across generations. A fifth detail connects to creativity, as the loosened associations of REM allow distant concepts to merge in novel ways, fostering insights that later surface in waking problem-solving much like the sudden clarity that once guided ancient navigators by star patterns. A sixth point arises from problem-solving theories, where the narrative flow of dreams tests hypothetical scenarios, enabling the mind to explore outcomes that logic alone might overlook, and sometimes yielding practical solutions upon awakening. A seventh gentle fact highlights activation synthesis models, in which brainstem signals randomly activate cortical areas during REM, and the forebrain weaves these fragments into coherent stories that, while not purposeful in origin, nevertheless support emotional integration as a secondary benefit. An eighth observation recalls how memory consolidation theories emphasize the role of sleep spindles, brief bursts of oscillatory activity that coordinate hippocampal and cortical dialogue to stabilize new information against interference from subsequent experiences. A ninth reflection emerges in evolutionary accounts proposing that dreaming refined social intelligence by simulating interpersonal dynamics, helping early humans navigate alliances and rivalries with greater subtlety than wakeful reasoning alone could achieve. A 10th insight surfaces from neuroscience examining the default mode network, active in both mind-wandering and dreaming, where self-referential processing during sleep may consolidate personal narratives and support a coherent sense of identity across changing circumstances. An 11th fact notes that creativity benefits arise particularly in the final REM periods before morning, when associative networks reach peak fluidity and permit the recombination of elements from distant memory stores into unexpected forms. A 12th perspective considers emotional processing through the lens of fear extinction, in which repeated exposure to mild threats in dreams gradually reduces amygdala reactivity, offering a natural mechanism for resilience that complements therapeutic approaches developed millennia later. A 13th detail appears in studies linking dream content to waking cognitive performance, where individuals who report more problem-oriented dreams often show improved performance on insight tasks the following day, hinting at overnight rehearsal of flexible thinking. A 14th observation touches on the possibility that dreaming supports metabolic clearance in the brain, with increased glymphatic flow during sleep-flushing proteins that accumulate through neural activity, and thereby maintaining long-term cognitive health. A 15th gentle fact connects threat simulation to modern anxiety research, suggesting that mild nocturnal rehearsals of worst-case scenarios prepare the nervous system for real stresses without overwhelming it, much as ancestral peoples may have prepared through ritual storytelling around fires. A 16th point highlights how memory consolidation extends beyond facts to include procedural skills, with athletes and musicians showing enhanced motor patterns after nights rich in REM, as if the dreaming brain practices sequences in an imagined space free from physical limitation. A 17th reflection explores psychoanalytic interpretations gently reframed by contemporary psychology, where dreams may process unresolved wishes not as literal fulfillments, but as symbolic integrations that ease emotional tension accumulated across waking hours. An 18th insight emerges when we examine cross-cultural evolutionary perspectives in which dreaming likely aided in transmitting survival knowledge through shared narratives, allowing groups to encode collective lessons about resources or dangers without direct experience. A 19th fact surfaces in research on creativity during incubation periods, where setting aside a problem before sleep often leads to solutions because dreaming continues associative exploration in the background, bypassing the narrow focus of daytime attention. A 20th observation considers how emotional processing interacts with memory, selectively strengthening recollections tied to strong feelings while weakening neutral ones, thus prioritizing what matters for future well-being. A 21st detail recalls neuroimaging evidence that the brain replays spatial layouts during dreams, supporting navigation skills and environmental mapping that would have been vital for hunter-gatherers traversing unknown terrains. A 22nd gentle fact notes competing theories in which dreaming serves primarily as a form of offline computation, allowing the mind to update internal models of the world based on new data gathered each day and refine predictions for the morrow. A 23rd perspective appears in evolutionary psychology, linking dream aggression to status competition, where simulated conflicts may have honed strategies for resource acquisition and mate selection across human prehistory. A 24th insight connects problem-solving to the absence of external feedback during sleep, enabling bolder hypothesis testing than waking caution permits and occasionally surfacing as intuitive breakthroughs at dawn. A 25th fact highlights how emotional regulation theories propose that dreams redistribute effective charge across memory networks, preventing any single event from dominating future responses and fostering psychological flexibility. A 26th observation surfaces from studies of REM behavior disorder, where the loss of normal muscle atonia reveals the intensity of dream enactments and underscores the brain's commitment to simulating actions as if they were real. A 27th reflection considers the role of dreaming in creativity across artistic traditions, where the fluid imagery of sleep has long supplied metaphors and motifs that later crystallize into cultural expressions of beauty and meaning. A 28th gentle fact emerges from comparative neuroscience, showing that species with complex social lives exhibit more REM, implying that dreaming supports the emotional bookkeeping required to maintain bonds within groups. A 29th point notes that threat simulation may operate at multiple levels, from literal dangers to abstract worries, allowing the mind to rehearse coping strategies that generalize across both ancestral and contemporary challenges. A 30th insight appears when we consider how memory consolidation and emotional processing converge in the hippocampus, where affective tags guide which experiences receive priority during overnight replay and thus shape the narrative core of many dreams. A 31st fact underscores the open-ended nature of these theories, as no single account yet explains every feature of dreaming, and researchers continue to explore how consolidation, simulation, and creativity might operate as complementary rather than competing functions. A 32nd observation brings forward the possibility that dreaming simply sustains consciousness itself during periods of reduced external input, preserving the brain's capacity for awareness so that waking returns as a seamless continuation rather than a sudden restart. A 33rd and perhaps most encompassing perspective lingers on the quiet convergence of all these views, suggesting that the purpose of dreaming may ultimately reside in its gentle capacity to integrate memory, emotion, creativity, and evolutionary preparedness into one fluid process that leaves the sleeper both restored and subtly prepared for whatever the next hillside or horizon may bring. From this understanding flows a deeper appreciation for the night's unseen labours, where each theory adds a thread to the larger tapestry without claiming to complete it, and the mind continues its work whether we name its purposes or simply rest beneath the turning stars. Yet as those turning stars continue their gentle arcs and the unseen labours of memory and emotion begin to quiet, the dreaming mind often turns toward images that feel strangely familiar no matter where the sleeper rests. Across continents and centuries, certain scenes recur with quiet persistence, inviting us to consider what shared threads might link the visions of a villager in rural Japan with those of a traveller beside the Mediterranean or a student in a northern city. A first gentle fact emerges from large-scale surveys of dream reports, where falling sensations appear in roughly 1 in 3 accounts worldwide, often accompanied by a sudden jolt that researchers link to the brain's partial reactivation of balance-related circuits in the vestibular system during the transition into REM. A second observation notes that teeth dreams, in which teeth loosen or crumble, surface repeatedly in clinical collections from Europe, Asia, and the Americas, with some studies suggesting these images coincide with periods of heightened stress or bodily awareness rather than any literal dental concern. A third reflection surfaces when flying dreams are examined across cultures, revealing that sensations of soaring without effort appear in narratives from indigenous Australian songlines to modern European journals, possibly reflecting the temporary suspension of gravity signals that normally constrain movement during wakefulness. A fourth insight arises from anthropological records showing that water themes, whether calm lakes or rushing rivers, recur in dream descriptions from desert nomads and island dwellers alike, hinting at an ancient association between fluid imagery and emotional states that transcends local environments. A fifth detail connects recurrent chasing dreams to evolutionary patterns observed in multiple societies, where the sensation of being pursued may rehearse vigilance circuits without asserting that every instance carries the same ancestral weight. A sixth point highlights how examinations of nudity and dreams across cultures reveal a common thread of vulnerability rather than literal exposure, with participants in psychological studies often describing a feeling of being seen without judgment once the initial surprise fades. A seventh gentle fact emerges from research comparing dream symbols in literate and oral traditions, where houses or dwellings frequently represent the self in both settings, their rooms and corridors mapping onto aspects of personal history that the waking mind rarely inspects so freely. An eighth observation recalls that animals appear as companions or messengers in dream reports gathered from Amazonian tribes to Scandinavian archives, their behaviours sometimes echoing real-world encounters, while at other times blending into hybrid forms that spark curiosity about how memory recombines familiar creatures. A ninth reflection surfaces when studies track the prevalence of examination or performance dreams among students and professionals on several continents, noting that these scenarios often intensify before significant life transitions without claiming they predict outcomes. A tenth insight appears in cross-cultural analyses of death or loss themes, which surface gently in many collections yet rarely produce lasting distress upon waking, suggesting the dreaming brain may practice acceptance in a space free from permanent consequence. An 11th fact notes that time distortions, such as clocks running backward or events unfolding out of sequence, appear in laboratory awakenings from REM across diverse participant groups, underscoring how the absence of external anchors allows narrative flow to bend in ways that invite quiet wonder rather than alarm. A 12th perspective considers the science behind being unable to run or speak in dreams, where muscle atonia during REM prevents actual movement, while the forebrain continues to generate the intention, creating a mismatch that many cultures have interpreted through stories of invisible bonds or tests of will. A 13th detail emerges from research on shared symbols like keys or doors, which recur in dream diaries from urban and rural settings alike and may reflect the mind's ongoing work of opening or closing possibilities without requiring any single universal code. A 14th observation touches on the gentle frequency of meeting deceased loved ones in dreams, documented in bereavement studies worldwide, where such encounters often bring comfort or unresolved questions that linger softly into morning rather than resolving into certainty. A 15th gentle fact connects flying and falling to vestibular reactivation patterns measured in sleep laboratories, showing that brief bursts of inner ear signaling can color entire dream sequences without dictating their emotional tone. A 16th point highlights how teeth-related imagery sometimes aligns with heightened awareness of the body's boundaries during periods of fatigue, a pattern noted in both clinical interviews and historical folklore without asserting direct causation. A 17th reflection explores the possibility that water and weather symbols serve as metaphors for mood shifts, with stormy seas appearing more often in reports from individuals navigating emotional turbulence, though individual differences remain wide. An 18th insight surfaces when researchers compare flying dreams across age groups, finding that sensations of effortless lift occur more readily in younger dreamers, whose spatial processing remains especially fluid during sleep. A 19th fact notes that being late or unprepared appears as a recurrent motif in accounts from achievement-oriented societies, yet similar themes of urgency surface in slower-paced cultures under different guises, suggesting the underlying concern with readiness may be more widespread than any single cultural expression. A 20th observation considers how landscapes that feel both familiar and strange recur across continents, their shifting horizons perhaps reflecting the brain's continuous updating of internal maps during overnight replay. A 21st detail recalls that money or valuable objects in dreams often carry emotional rather than literal weight in studies from varied economic backgrounds, their appearance sparking curiosity about what the mind deems worth safeguarding overnight. A 20-second gentle fact emerges from examinations of school or classroom settings in adult dream reports, where long-finished chapters of life reappear as gentle rehearsals of competence, rather than sources of fresh anxiety. A 23rd perspective appears when teeth dreams are linked to transient changes in oral sensation during sleep, offering one physiological thread among many that researchers continue to explore without claiming exclusivity. A 24th insight connects recurrent dreams of being trapped to moments when real-life decisions feel constrained, a pattern observed across multiple longitudinal studies, yet always tempered by the wide variety of individual responses. A 25th fact highlights how animals that speak or guide the dreamer appear in collections spanning ancient texts to contemporary journals, their presence inviting reflection on how the mind grants voice to instincts that remain wordless by day. A 26th observation surfaces from research on flying dreams in which control feels partial or lost, mirroring the vestibular uncertainties that can arise even in waking balance tasks, and reminding us that dream physics need not obey ordinary rules. A 27th reflection explores the gentle recurrence of meeting strangers who feel significant, documented in cross-cultural samples, where such figures sometimes blend features of known people into new composites that spark quiet questions upon awakening. A 28th gentle fact notes that falling dreams sometimes end in safe landings within laboratory reports, suggesting the brain may rehearse recovery as readily as peril without requiring external proof. A 29th point considers how teeth imagery occasionally coincides with broader themes of transition, such as leaving one life stage for another, a connection noted in interviews yet left open to personal interpretation. A 30th insight appears when universal elements like light or darkness are tracked across dream sets, revealing that shifts in illumination often mark changes in emotional tone rather than any fixed symbolic dictionary. A 31st fact underscores that recurrent dreams of houses with hidden rooms appear in diverse populations, their discovery often bringing a sense of expansion that lingers softly after waking. A 32nd observation brings forward the possibility that symbols such as paths or thresholds recur because they mirror the mind's nightly movement between states of awareness, a pattern that continues to invite study without final resolution. A 33rd and perhaps most encompassing perspective lingers on the quiet observation that while certain images surface again and again across cultures, their meanings remain fluid, shaped by personal history as much as by any shared neural architecture, so that each dreamer may find both recognition and fresh mystery within the same ancient motifs. From this gentle convergence flows a renewed sense of companionship with the countless others who have walked similar inner landscapes, resting now beneath the same turning stars, while their minds continue the quiet work of weaving symbols that feel at once intimate and widely shared. Yet even as those shared symbols settle like soft dust across the turning world, a deeper stillness invites us to linger at the edges of what remains unknown, where the dreaming mind continues its patient work beneath the same quiet stars that once watched over olive groves in central Italy, and now watch over city rooftops and forest canopies alike. If one could stand tonight on a windswept ridge above an ancient caldera, the dark bowl of sky overhead might feel like an open question itself, older than any map and gentler than any answer, reminding us that the science of dreams for all its careful measurements, still meets horizons where wonder outpaces certainty. A first gentle fact emerges from ongoing neuroimaging studies that track REM activity without fully explaining why the same neural patterns sometimes produce narrative richness and sometimes dissolve into fleeting fragments, leaving researchers to explore whether the difference lies in subtle shifts of acetylcholine levels that no single scan has yet isolated. A second observation notes that questions persist around the precise boundary between dreaming and waking perception, with experiments showing that brief sounds or touches can enter dream content without awakening the sleeper, hinting at a porous threshold whose mechanisms continue to invite refined measurement rather than final definition. A third reflection surfaces in debates over the evolutionary origins of dreaming, where some models propose it rehearses social scenarios, while others suggest it simply clears metabolic waste, each theory supported by partial evidence, yet none claiming to close the inquiry entirely. A fourth insight arises from studies of dream recall variability across lifespans, revealing that older adults often report fewer dreams without any corresponding change in REM duration, prompting gentle curiosity about how memory consolidation itself may quietly alter overnight. A fifth detail connects the still unresolved role of dreams in emotional regulation, as longitudinal data show reduced anxiety after nights rich in REM, yet cannot specify whether the benefit stems from narrative processing or from the simple passage of time spent in atonia. A sixth point highlights emerging work on the genetics of dream vividness, where twin studies indicate moderate heritability without identifying any single gene that dictates content or frequency. A seventh gentle fact emerges when researchers examine the relationship between dream content and next-day mood, noting correlations that hold across populations yet leave room for individual temperament to shape outcomes in ways that large data sets continue to unpack. An eighth observation recalls that the function of non-REM dreaming remains less mapped than its REM counterpart, with slow-wave stages sometimes yielding abstract thoughts, whose purpose researchers are only beginning to trace through targeted awakenings. A ninth reflection explores the possibility that dreams serve as a form of overnight therapy, supported by clinical observations of nightmare resolution, yet tempered by the wide range of responses seen in therapeutic trials. A tenth insight appears in investigations of precognitive dream reports, which surface in controlled studies at rates slightly above chance, without reaching statistical thresholds that would confirm any genuine foresight. An 11th fact notes that the brain's ability to generate coherent scenes from random neural firing still puzzles computational neuroscientists, who model the process as predictive coding, yet acknowledge that lived dream experience often exceeds what current simulations can replicate. A 12th perspective considers how cultural expectations shape what counts as a meaningful dream, with anthropological records showing that societies emphasizing prophetic visions record more such instances than those viewing dreams as private reverie. A 13th detail emerges from research on the neural correlates of selfhood in dreams, where the absence of a stable first-person perspective in some reports raises questions about how the default mode network behaves during sleep. A 14th observation touches on the gentle persistence of dream amnesia, now linked to shifts in hippocampal replay but still unexplained in its selective nature, as certain vivid images survive into morning while equally intense ones vanish. A 15th gentle fact connects the study of dream bizarreness to creativity research, where participants who report unusual dream elements sometimes score higher on divergent thinking tasks without any demonstrated causal pathway. A 16th point highlights ongoing inquiries into whether dreaming continues during brief micro-arousals, with polysomnography data revealing fragments of mentation that blur the line between sleep stages. A 17th reflection explores the frontier of pharmacological influence on dreams, noting that certain medications alter content patterns in measurable ways, while the underlying neurotransmitter interactions remain incompletely charted. An 18th insight surfaces when scientists consider the limits of laboratory dream collection, acknowledging that the very act of awakening a participant may truncate narratives that would otherwise unfold toward quieter resolutions. A 19th fact notes that cross-species comparisons of sleep architecture reveal REM-like states in birds and reptiles. Yet the question of whether these states include anything resembling human narrative dreaming stays open. A 20th observation considers the emerging field of dream engineering, where targeted sounds during sleep can guide content in small studies without yet clarifying long-term effects on well-being. A 21st detail recalls that the relationship between lucid dreaming and metacognition continues to intrigue consciousness researchers, as trained participants sometimes gain awareness mid-dream, while retaining only partial control over unfolding events. A 22nd gentle fact emerges from surveys showing that roughly half of adults experience at least one lucid dream in their lifetime, with frequency varying widely and no consensus on whether the capacity can be reliably cultivated through simple intention alone. A 23rd reflection surfaces when studies of lucid dreaming examine its potential to treat nightmares, revealing reductions in distress for some participants, while others report the added layer of awareness as initially unsettling rather than comforting. A 24th insight appears in investigations of brain activity during lucid episodes, where prefrontal regions show heightened gamma oscillations that mirror waking self-reflection, without fully bridging the explanatory gap between awareness and ordinary dreaming. A 25th fact notes that the philosophical implications of lucid dreaming for theories of consciousness remain under discussion, as the ability to recognize one's state while asleep challenges simple distinctions between simulation and reality. A 26th observation touches on the gentle frontier of animal dreaming, where rats running mazes in waking life replay similar hippocampal sequences during sleep, suggesting spatial rehearsal that may parallel human memory processing without confirming subjective experience. A 27th gentle fact emerges from observations of sleeping dogs whose twitching limbs and vocalizations sometimes mirror daytime play, prompting researchers to wonder whether these movements correspond to dream narratives or simply reflect motor discharge. A 28th reflection explores cephalopod sleep states, where cuttlefish display rapid color changes and eye movements that invite speculation about visual dreaming yet remain far removed from mammalian REM physiology. A 29th insight connects studies of avian unihemispheric sleep to possible dreaming in one brain hemisphere, while the other maintains vigilance, raising questions about whether such partial states include anything like narrative content. A 30th fact notes that emerging research on elephants and dolphins, both species with minimal or absent REM, still records complex nocturnal behaviors whose relation to dreaming stays entirely open. A 31st observation considers how the absence of verbal report in animals leaves researchers reliant on indirect measures, such as neural replay or behavioral enactment, each method illuminating fragments while underscoring the enduring mystery of subjective experience across species. A 32nd gentle fact surfaces when comparative neuroscientists examine the conserved role of the pons in generating REM atonia, noting that this brainstem mechanism appears in diverse mammals, yet its link to any inner imagery remains a matter of careful inference rather than direct access. A 33rd and perhaps most encompassing perspective lingers on the quiet recognition that every new measurement of dreaming, whether through electrodes, surveys, or cross-species observation, simultaneously deepens appreciation for the phenomenon and multiplies the questions that still await gentle exploration. In this ongoing conversation between evidence and wonder, the dreaming mind reveals itself not as a puzzle soon to be solved, but as a companion whose full nature continues to invite patient attention. Thank you for resting with these reflections tonight. If the quiet unfolding of dream science has brought a measure of calm or curiosity, please consider liking this video, sharing your own gentle thoughts in the comments below, and subscribing for more explorations that honor the slow rhythms of rest and imagination. You can find additional sleep-friendly content on the channel whenever you wish to return.